When I stepped into that kitchen, the air was thick with the smell of burnt toast and humiliation. My daughter stood at the sink, wrists red and cracked, while 8 of her in-laws barked orders from the living room like customers at a diner. One laughed when she dropped a plate. Another called her sweet help. My name is Evelyn Harwood. I am 69 years old, and I spent my life savings to buy my daughter a home, only to watch her become the maid inside it. But what they didn't know was, before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family, the kind of betrayal that hides behind polite smiles and Sunday manners. Because what happened in that house wasn't just disrespect. It was war disguised as hospitality. The first time I realized my daughter was disappearing, it wasn't in that kitchen, it was years earlier, in a house that didn't belong to her either. Clara was 39 when she finally left her first husband. 18 years of marriage to a man who never raised his voice, but somehow made silence feel like a weapon. His name was Peter. To outsiders, he was stable, responsible, the kind of man mothers wished for their daughters. Inside that house, though, he ruled with indifference. His punishments weren't bruises, they were weeks of quiet contempt. Meals eaten without a glance. Days where he'd act as if she didn't exist. I remember one Christmas vividly. Clara had baked all-night gingerbread cookies, pumpkin pie, even a ham she glazed with honey and cloves. The house smelled like cinnamon and warmth. She wrapped his gift herself, a leather wallet embossed with his initials. When he opened it, she wrapped his gift herself, then handed her a rectangular box. Inside was a vacuum cleaner hose. "It's an upgrade," he said. "You said the suction wasn't good last time." He wasn't joking. I saw her smile, thin and forced, and I swallowed my anger with my wine. That night, she called me after midnight, whispering from the laundry room. "Maybe he didn't mean it that way," she said, voice trembling. I wanted to tell her the truth, that he absolutely meant it that way, but instead I said, "Sleep. Honey, we'll talk tomorrow." I didn't know it back then. But that moment would come back to haunt both of us. When she finally filed for divorce, Peter made sure to gut her on the way out. He took the house, the car, even her bakery equipment, claiming everything was joint marital property. She came to my apartment in Savannah with 2 suitcases and a look I hadn't seen since she was a little girl who'd lost her cat. For months, she barely spoke. She'd sit on my couch watching old cooking shows, holding a mug of cold coffee she never drank. At the time, I was still working part-time in the finance department at Memorial Hospital. My knees hurt, and my eyes strained after long hours in front of the computer. But I kept clocking in because of her. I'd spent decades balancing other people's budgets, but never imagined my own retirement fund would be used to rebuild my child's life from ashes. I had $45,000 saved, every cent earned through overtime, skipped vacations, and thrift store coats. It wasn't much, but it was supposed to keep me afloat when my body could no longer keep up with fluorescent lights and numbers. And thrift store coats. I found myself staring at a real estate listing one humid June afternoon. A small farmhouse on the outskirts of Savannah. White siding, 3 bedrooms, 2 acres of land, a wraparound porch, and an old fig tree near the fence. The asking price was $52,000. I'd have to take a small loan to cover the rest. I remember sitting in the bank office, air conditioning humming Too Cold against my arms. The loan officer explaining interest rates while I stared at the photo of that fig tree. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "At your age, you should be thinking about security." I smiled politely. "I am," I said, "just not mine." When I handed Clara the keys, her face crumpled. "Mom," she whispered, clutching them like something sacred. "It's really mine." "Yours," I said, hugging her tight. "Yours and no one else's." We spent the first week scrubbing the walls, painting the kitchen pale yellow, and replacing the rusty faucet. I remember her laughter when the new faucet splashed us both. For the first time in years, she looked alive. I planted herbs along the porch, and together we planted that fig tree in the backyard. The soil was stubborn and clay-heavy, but she dug anyway, sweat streaking down her temple. "Think it'll survive?" she asked. "If we water it," I said, "and if we don't let anyone cut it down." For a while, life was peaceful. I'd visit every weekend, bring her fresh groceries, and sit on the porch watching her bake small batches of pies to sell to neighbors. There was something healing in those quiet afternoons, the smell of butter and sugar, the hum of crickets, the golden light filtering through the fig leaves. Then came Martin Green. She met him at a hardware store in town. Her kitchen faucet had started leaking again, and he offered to help fix it. He was polite, with the kind of southern charm that makes you lower your guard, and he offered to help fix it. "I can have it sealed up in no time," he'd told her. She called me afterward, sounding giddy. "He's different, Mom," she said. "He listens. He even asked what kind of frosting I like." I wanted to believe her. God knows she deserved good things. The first time I met him, he was friendly. Attentive, too attentive. Maybe. But it was the way his phone kept buzzing during dinner that unsettled me. Every few minutes, he'd glance down and smile. Once, I caught the caller ID reflected in his glass. "Mom." He excused himself from the table to take the call, saying, "Yes, I know. Mom, no. We're fine. Yes, I'll be home Sunday." "She's protective," he said when he returned. "Widowed a few years back. She worries." Protective was one word for it. I didn't know then that protective meant possessive, that Vivian Green treated her grown children like chess pieces, moved them where she pleased, guilted them when they resisted. I didn't know that her charm was a mask, one she wore like armor in public, but used like a blade in private. Clara and Martin married 4 months later. Too fast. I thought, too sudden. But she looked happy. Truly happy. The wedding was small. Just family in the backyard under the fig tree. I remember Vivian arriving in a pastel suit that screamed money and control. She hugged me lightly, her perfume sharp and floral. "Such a lovely little place," she said, scanning the house like an appraiser. "So cozy. Almost quaint. Almost." The word stung, but I smiled anyway. Southern politeness runs deep. We learn to smile while sharpening our knives in silence. During the ceremony, I stood beside the fig tree, watching my daughter say vows beneath the same branches we'd planted with our bare hands. I told myself this was her second chance. That maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found peace. I didn't know it then. But peace was already leaving the room quietly, on kitten heels and pearls right behind Vivian Green. The first cracks appeared not even 6 months after the wedding. At first, they were small things invisible to anyone who didn't know my daughter like I did. A change in her tone when she talked about Martin's family. A longer pause before she picked up my calls. The nervous laugh she used when I asked if everything was okay. One afternoon, I dropped by the house unannounced with a basket of peaches from the market. It was a hot July day, and the cicadas screamed so loud the air felt alive. I expected to find Clara in the kitchen, covered in flour like usual. Instead, I found her sitting on the porch steps, staring at the driveway, her hands motionless in her lap. "Sweetheart," I said. She jumped, forcing a smile. "Mom, you should have called." That was when I noticed the laundry basket beside her, overflowing with men's shirts and children's clothes. "You doing laundry for the neighbors now?" I tried to joke. She looked away. "Just helping out." Martin's family came to visit. I stepped inside and froze. The living room looked like a storm had passed through. Suitcases stacked against the wall. Toys scattered across the floor. The faint smell of fried food lingering in the air. Voices came from the kitchen, laughter. Clinking plates. Someone shouting, "Laura, sorry." "Clara, where's the sugar?" There was Vivian's voice, too calm. Commanding. "These eggs are cold. Darling, could you make some fresh ones? You know how Martin likes them." I stood in the doorway for a full minute, watching my daughter move around like a shadow, quiet, mechanical. My blood ran cold. That woman had turned my daughter into hired help in her own home. I bit my tongue and didn't explode, not yet. I left the basket of peaches on the counter and drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. That night, I sat up until 2 a.m., drafting a text to Clara that I never sent. "Are you okay?" I typed, "Are you okay?" Because I knew if I asked, she'd lie. "I'm fine, Mom." She always did. 2 weeks later, she came to visit me. I noticed the raw skin around her wrists, the kind of red marks you get when your hands are always wet. Always busy. She covered them quickly when she caught me looking. "How's everyone?" I asked casually. "Oh, you know," she said. "Lively." She laughed. But it sounded hollow. I wanted to grab her hand, tell her to stop pretending, to get out while she could. But she wasn't ready to hear it. Survivors of control never are. You can't pull someone from quicksand if they're still convincing themselves it's just mud. I didn't know it back then. But Martin's mother had been slowly tightening her grip. It started with a few days' visit when her landlord supposedly raised the rent. Then came the sisters Amber and Carla, each with their excuses. One was between leases. The other needed a break from city stress. Soon after, the brother Derek arrived with his wife and 2 kids. Suddenly, the house wasn't a home anymore. It was a boarding house run by my daughter. Martin, of course, said nothing. "They're just family," he told her. "They'll leave soon." But they didn't. They never do when they find comfort in someone else's kindness. One night, Clara called me whispering from the bathroom. I could hear muffled laughter through the door, Vivian's voice leading the chorus. "Mom," Clara whispered. "They took the master bedroom." I thought I'd misheard. "What?" Vivian said her back hurts on the guest bed. So I let her and Martin stay in mine for a few days. But then Amber moved into the other room, and now I'm on the couch. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. "Sweetheart, that's not okay. That's your house." "I know," she said quietly. "But she's his mother. And I don't want to start trouble." There it was, the same sentence I had once said to my mother-in-law decades ago, when she told me I cooked too northern for a southern table. The same tone of quiet surrender. The same fear of being labeled ungrateful. I'd sworn my daughter would never inherit that fear. And yet, here it was alive, blooming again through her. The next few weeks, I started noticing changes in Clara's voice on the phone. She sounded smaller. I'd ask how she was, and she'd change the subject. I offered to visit, and she'd say, "It's not a good time." It was as if she'd built a wall between us, one that smelled of guilt and control. Then one morning, I received a grocery receipt in my mailbox, no note, just folded neatly inside an envelope. I recognized Clara's handwriting on the back. "They're eating me out of house and home. $800. Groceries for 8 people." I felt my chest tighten until breathing hurt. That was the day I decided to stop waiting for her to ask for help. I drove out to the property the next Saturday. I remember the road long, winding through the pine trees, the air thick with heat. When I pulled up, I saw a minivan and 2 sedans parked on the gravel. The yard was littered with toys. A half-burned barbecue grill sat abandoned near the porch. Inside, it smelled of bacon grease and air freshener. Vivian was sitting on the couch in a floral dress, a mug of coffee in one hand, remote control in the other. Her daughters were sprawled beside her, watching television. No one noticed me at first. Then Vivian looked up and smiled, that slow, syrupy kind of smile that hides a sting. "Evelyn, what a surprise," she said, as if I'd walked into her house. "We didn't know you were coming today." I said nothing for a moment. My eyes landed on my daughter at the sink, scrubbing dishes. Her back was turned, but I saw her shoulders trembling slightly, like she was trying not to cry. "It's my property," I said finally, like she was trying not to cry. "I can come whenever I want." Still smiling. "Oh, of course. Though technically it belongs to your daughter and my son now, doesn't it? Married life means what's hers is his." Her voice was soft, but the venom underneath could have stripped paint off the walls. I didn't reply. I just said, "Clara, come here, please." But my daughter didn't move. She looked frozen in place, her hands still in the soapy water. "I'm busy." "Mom," she whispered. "Let someone else finish that," I said firmly. "Come here." Vivian laughed. Actually laughed, a light, mocking sound that filled the room. "Oh, Evelyn, don't be so dramatic. She's just helping out. We're family. Remember, families help each other." The word family rolled off her tongue like a weapon. That was the exact moment I felt something shift inside me. Something that had been asleep for years, since the day I buried my husband. Since the day I stopped fighting the world because I thought I was too tired to win anymore. Standing there, in that kitchen, watching my daughter break under the weight of someone else's entitlement, I realized I still had fight left in me. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not a manipulative matriarch, not a weak son, not even fear, take my daughter's peace again. I didn't say anything that day. I just turned around and left. But as I drove away from that house, my reflection in the rearview mirror looked different. Harder, sharper, like a blade being sharpened on the stone of rage. They thought they had silenced her, but they had just awakened me. It started quietly, the way storms do, just a shift in air pressure, a heaviness that no one names. For weeks, I stayed away. I told myself that Clara needed space, a heaviness that no one names, that she was an adult and I shouldn't meddle. But I also knew that silence is how abuse survives. It grows best in houses where everyone pretends not to hear. My phone rang. The caller ID said Clara. But when I answered, no one spoke. All I heard was the faint sound of dishes clinking, then a sharp voice in the background. "Do it again." The table's still sticky. The line went dead. That was enough. I got in my car and drove. When I pulled into the driveway, Martin was on the porch, tinkering with his toolbox. He looked surprised to see me. Martin was on the porch. "We weren't expecting you." I stepped out, looked him straight in the eye. "I'm sure you weren't." Inside, the house looked worse than before, like a battlefield covered in casseroles. Vivian was sitting at the dining table, folding napkins as if she owned the place. "Well, bless your heart for dropping by," she said sweetly. "We were just talking about you." "I bet you were," I said. Clara appeared from the hallway, holding a stack of towels. Her eyes widened when she saw me, then flickered with something like fear. "Mom," she began. "Don't," I said softly. "Just sit." Vivian gave a little laugh. Oh, Evelyn, don't make this dramatic. We're family here. That's the second time you've said that word to me. I replied. You keep using it, but I don't think it means what you think it does. For a moment, the room froze. Then, Martin cleared his throat, muttered something about needing to check the shed, and vanished like a coward. I followed Clara to the porch. You need to tell me what's going on, I said. She shook her head. It's fine. Mom, really? Her voice cracked on the last word. She was lying. And she knew I knew. Did you ever sign anything like a deed transfer? I asked quietly. No, she said quickly. The house is still mine. That was the first breath I'd taken in days that didn't burn. Good, I said. Then we can fix this. Her eyes filled with tears. They'll hate me if I make them leave. They already do, I said. They just call it love. That night, I went home and started pulling old files from my cabinet, the original loan agreement, the property deed, the payment history. I spread them out across my kitchen table like war maps. Numbers calm me. Facts are loyal. The next day, I made some calls to the county clerk's office, to a friend of mine who worked in a lawyer's firm, to a paralegal I'd once helped balance accounts for. I learned things, useful things, like the fact that under Georgia law, property acquired before a marriage remains separate unless voluntarily transferred. And Clara hadn't transferred a damn thing. A week later, I came back. This time, I brought copies. Vivian was in the garden, trimming roses that weren't hers. You really shouldn't be cutting those, I said. They don't belong to you. She straightened up, squinting at me. Excuse me. The property, I said. It's in my daughter's name, not yours. Not your son's. Certainly not your daughter's. She smiled, slow and poisonous. You think papers matter more than family. I think theft does, I replied. Her hand tightened on the pruning shears. You need to learn your place. Evelyn, you're just the help who paid for the house. I felt the words hit like a slap. For a second, I almost laughed. Because in that moment, she wasn't pretending anymore. She dropped the sugar, and I could finally see the venom underneath. I'll remember that, I said, turning away. And so will the judge. That wiped the smile right off her face. When I left that afternoon, I noticed her eldest daughter Amber watching from the window, chewing gum like a vulture. The look she gave me wasn't curiosity, it was warning. These people were a unit, bound by greed, and I'd just declared war on them. That night, I called Clara again. Pack a small bag, I told her, just in case. In case of what? She whispered. In case they make you choose between peace and dignity. She didn't answer. I heard her breathing, then a quiet, okay. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already found a lawyer willing to file an emergency injunction if needed. His name was Carl Bennett, an old colleague of mine from the hospital board. A man who'd once said, these people were a unit. It wasn't just about property anymore. It was about control. And control was something I was very, very good at reclaiming. I didn't know how bad things would get yet. But I knew this. The next time Vivian Green laughed, she wouldn't be laughing for long. The week after that confrontation, everything accelerated. Manipulators always strike hardest when they sense you've stopped playing by their rules. It started with subtle things. Clara's calls became less frequent. When she did answer, I'd hear the edge of panic under her voice, like someone listening for footsteps. I'm fine. Mom, she'd whisper. They're just stressed. I think they know you're planning something. Of course they knew. Vivian Green had the instincts of a hawk and the ego of a queen. I could almost hear her saying it. That old woman stirring up trouble. We need to keep an eye on her. Then, one night, a knock rattled my door just before midnight. I opened it to find my daughter standing there, barefoot, mascaras smeared, her hands trembling. "Mom," she said, breathless, "I can't do it anymore." Her voice cracked, and everything inside me snapped. I pulled her into my arms, felt how small she'd become, like she'd folded herself in half just to survive. "What happened?" "She called me a parasite," she whispered. "Said I was living off their generosity. Said you bought that house just to control me." She looked up, eyes red, and Martin didn't say a word. He just stood there. That was the night Clara stopped defending them. The next morning, I made coffee while she slept on my couch, and I started planning. I wrote everything down, dates, words, every incident she told me. It wasn't anger driving me anymore. It was precision. Revenge isn't chaos, it's math done slowly. By afternoon, I drove her back. She wanted to grab a few things quietly, just clothes and her baking equipment. I parked across the street and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. When she finally came out, her face was pale. "They took the mixer," she said flatly, "and the dishes you gave me." That night, I called Carl, the lawyer. "They're encroaching on her personal property." I said, "He's Sid. They'll push boundaries until you draw one in ink. Let's draft a notice ownership clarification and an eviction timeline." It was legal language for what I really wanted to say. "Get the hell out before I make you." 2 days later, the envelope was ready. Clara slipped it under the kitchen fruit bowl neatly folded, addressed to the Green family. Vivian's reaction came within hours. Clara called me that night, whispering from the porch. "She's furious. Mom. Said you're trying to divide the family." "Good," I said. "That means she finally knows I can." But things got darker after that. One afternoon, Clara texted, "Something's wrong with the fig tree." When I arrived, I saw its leaves yellowing, roots dug up like someone had kicked at them. I knelt down and realized it wasn't disease. Someone had poured bleach into the soil. The smell hit me sharp, chemical, deliberate. Vivian was sitting on the porch swing, pretending to read a magazine. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" she said without looking up. I straightened slowly. "That tree was planted by my daughter and me," I said. She flipped a page. "Things die. That's nature. That's when I stopped caring about being polite." "You've had your fun," I said, "but you've made a mistake. You think cruelty is strength. It isn't. It's rot. And rot always spreads to the root." For the first time, she looked up. Her eyes narrowed. "You think you can take this from us?" "I already did," I said. "The deed says so." She laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "Paper means nothing. Blood does." That line stuck with me, because in her world, blood excused everything: entitlement, cruelty, even theft. But I wasn't part of her bloodline, and that made me dangerous. The following day, Martin showed up at my door. He looked exhausted, his shirt untucked, his voice tired. "Please, Evelyn," he said. "You're making things worse. Mom's just trying to help." "Help," I repeated. "By stealing, by breaking her own daughter-in-law." He rubbed his face. "You don't understand. She's been through a lot." "I do understand," I said coldly. "And I'm done excusing her." He hesitated, then muttered, "You're poisoning Clara against us." That word poisoning lit a fire in me. No. Martin. I'm detoxing her. He left without another word. But as his car rolled down my street, I knew something had shifted. They were scared now. And scared people make mistakes. That weekend, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside were photographs Clara in her own kitchen. Cleaning, serving, smiling like nothing was wrong. The message was clear. We're watching. I burned the photos in my sink, the edges curling like the lies they told. Then I called Carl again. We file Monday. I said, Are you sure? Yes. I said, They've declared war. I'm just ending it legally. Still, they've declared war. That Sunday night, Clara's car tires were slashed. Even I wasn't ready for what came next. The family swore they knew nothing. It was Vivian's way of sending a message. You can't leave us. That was her biggest mistake. Because if there's one thing you should never do, it's threaten a woman who's already lost everything once. By Monday morning, the court papers were filed. The eviction notice was official. And for the first time in years, I felt peace, not the fragile kind that comes from pretending, but the solid, sharp peace of someone finally drawing bloodlines of her own. They thought they could bury us under guilt and control. But what they didn't know was I'd been digging my way out since the day they moved in. The morning of the confrontation, the sky over Savannah was the color of pewter flat. Heavy, as if it already knew what was coming. I woke before dawn, brewed a pot of coffee, and laid out the documents one last time, the deed, the purchase receipts, the notarized transfer record. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Clara sat at the kitchen table, her face pale but resolute. Do we really have to do this? Mom. I looked at her, my daughter, who had spent months apologizing for her own suffering. We don't have to. I said, we get to. At exactly 9:00 a.m. I parked in front of the house I had once dreamed she'd bake bread in. Now it looked like a fortress, 3 cars lined in the driveway, blinds drawn tight. Martin opened the door first, jaw tight. Evelyn, this isn't a good time. I stepped past him. It's exactly the right time. Inside, the Green family was assembled like a tribunal. Vivian sat at the head of the table in her floral dress, her daughters flanking her like attendants. Coffee cups, half-eaten biscuits, and that same suffocating smell of fake lavender filled the air. Well, Vivian said with a brittle smile, looks like we're having a meeting. No, I said calmly, setting my folder on the table. This is a clearing. Clara stood by the door, frozen between 2 worlds, her hands twisted in front of her. This is a clearing. I gave her a small nod, silent permission to stop bowing. Vivian leaned back, voice syrup smooth, the same way mine used to when I faced my own mother-in-law years ago. Evelyn, that's not how family should behave. I met her eyes. You're right. You've been stirring up a lot of drama. I slid the deed across the table. Family shouldn't behave like this. Read it. Oh, I know what it says. But paper doesn't mean much when it comes to heart matters. I smiled faintly. Good thing this isn't about your heart. It's about property law. Her daughters exchanged glances quick, uneasy. Vivian's voice dropped lower, colder. You think you can kick me out of my son's home. I think you already kicked my daughter out of hers. She laughed. A harsh, humorless sound. She's welcome here as long as she follows the rules. Whose rules? I asked. Yours. Because I read the county code last night and the only rule that matters is ownership. This house is Clara's separate property, acquired before marriage. You've overstayed your welcome. The air in the room shifted tense. Electric. Martin took a step forward. Mom, maybe we should. Quiet, Vivian snapped. Don't embarrass yourself. Her mask was slipping. That's when I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. I've got your little garden speech recorded. By the way, the one about me being just the help who paid for the house. It's admissible if we need to prove malicious occupancy. Vivian's eyes flickered. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, I said softly. Because you made one mistake. Vivian, you thought politeness was weakness. It's not. It's patience. Because you made one mistake. No one spoke. For a long moment, then, Vivian stood. Fine, she said tightly. If you want this house so badly, keep it. But don't expect Martin to go with you. He's loyal to his blood. I looked at my son-in-law pale, sweating, lips trembling. But don't expect Martin to go with you, I said. Martin. He swallowed hard. You want to speak for yourself. I just think we all need time to cool off. His eyes darted to his mother. Quiet. Lethal. No. Clara's voice cut through the air steady. I'm done cooling off. I've been cold for months. Martin opened it wide. She walked to the door. Could you read that last part again? Mom. I unfolded the document. This notice requires all unauthorized residents to vacate within 72 hours or face court-ordered removal. Vivian's face went white. You can't do that. Clara's reply was almost gentle. Watch me. Outside. Thunder rolled in the distance low. Distant. Like a drumbeat. The whole house seemed to hold its breath. Vivian's daughters began gathering their things, muttering curses under their breath. Derek appeared in the hallway, holding his car keys. Even Silent George, came out from the den. Looked at me. Derek appeared in the hallway. She's right. Viv? He said softly. It's not ours. Vivian spun on him. Don't you dare take her side. It's not ours. I'm not. Looked at me. I'm taking the truths. It was the first honest sentence I'd heard in that house. Vivian stood there trembling, clutching her pearls as if they could save her. Then she looked at me, eyes burning. You think you've won, don't you? I picked up my folder, straightened it neatly. No, I said. I picked up my folder. I just stopped losing. We stared at each other across that kitchen table, two widows from the same generation, molded by different kinds of pride. And for the first time, she saw me not as an intruder, but as her equal. The realization cut her deeper than anything I could have said. Clara stepped beside me, her hand brushing mine. Let's go, she whispered. We walked out together, down the steps, past the cracked fig tree that somehow still had one green leaf clinging to its branch. Behind us, the door slammed. Rain started to fall sudden, fierce, washing the dust off the porch, the air, the weight of months. I looked up and felt something unclench inside me. The Green family could laugh, shout, and rewrite the story however they wanted. But the truth was already written in ink, in law, and in the quiet defiance of a mother who refused to let history repeat itself. They thought I came for revenge. But really, I came for redemption, hers, and mine. And as the storm broke over Savannah, I realized that sometimes justice doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence and the sound of a front door closing for the last time. The rain didn't stop for 2 whole days. It washed everything: the porch, the sidewalk, the hollow sound of their laughter that used to echo through Clara's walls. When it finally cleared, the house felt different, quieter, like it could breathe again. Clara and I spent the morning cleaning, scrubbing, folding, reclaiming. Every wiped countertop felt like an exorcism. When she found the old fig branch cracked near the roots, she started to cry. "I can fix it," she whispered, pressing it back into the soil. "You don't have to," I said. "It'll grow if it wants to." By noon, the moving trucks were gone. Vivian and her daughters had cleared out early, leaving behind perfume-stained towels, chipped china, and a single earring on the dresser, a symbol of vanity, or maybe defeat. I thought that was the end, until the letter arrived. No return address, no stamp. Just my name, Evelyn Harwood, written in Vivian's sharp cursive. Inside, one sentence: "Enjoy your victory. But remember, the deed doesn't protect you from family." I read it twice. Then I smiled, folded it neatly, and slid it into my ledger. Evidence, not emotion. Because people like Vivian always think revenge means fire and noise. But real revenge, the kind that lasts, is quiet. It's knowing you've taken back your peace, while your enemies spend every night wondering when the next knock will come. Later that evening, George called. His voice was low, careful. "She's not taking it well," he said, blaming everyone but herself. Said she might call her attorney. "Let her." I said, "It'll save me the postage." He chuckled softly, a sad sound. "You remind me of her. You know, the difference is, you use your strength for something that matters." After we hung up, I walked outside. The sky had turned a warm gold, the kind that only comes after a storm. Clara was on the porch swing, sipping tea. For the first time in months, her hands weren't trembling. "Do you think she'll come back?" she asked. "Probably," I said. "People like her always do. They circle the ruins, pretending they still own them." She smiled faintly. "And what will you do if she does?" I looked at the driveway at the spot where the family's cars used to sit, now empty and clean. "I'll be ready," I said, because what they didn't know was I'd already started another file, labeled, indexed, and waiting. Not out of fear, out of principle. Because some battles don't end in court, they just go quiet until the next storm rolls in. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, you know that silence can cut deeper than words. Sometimes, the people who smile at your table are the same ones pulling your chair away. But strength isn't about shouting louder, it's about standing still when everyone expects you to fall. So, tell me, have you ever been betrayed by someone who called you family? Leave a comment and share your story. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because this story isn't over. There's always another storm coming.